Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum. We want to welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El Hajj Maurice Salah Khan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. This afternoon in the United States, this evening in Johannesburg, South Africa, I'm coming to you from a hotel room in New Jersey, in northern New Jersey. I was here last night for a special event that was organized by American Muslims for Palestine. It was a very successful event at a hotel here in northern New Jersey, and some very impressive presentations were made by a number of Muslims and non-Muslims. It was overall a very impressive program, and I'm looking forward to being able to take pieces of video once I'm able to access them and share them with much of our audience. There was a lot that was said. Some of it, not only thought-provoking, but very, deeply emotional because of the nature of the issues that were being addressed. But with that said, we want to continue a conversation that we started a couple of weeks ago with my good friend and brother in Islam, Dr. Sami Al-Arian. Our brother is an academic, very well-known and respected academic who spent many years in the United States before becoming a political prisoner himself. And eventually, once his case was settled, having to leave the United States as a part of that settlement. But America's loss has been Turkey's gain. And our brother is doing some phenomenal work in his area of expertise in that country. And we are very pleased to be able to have him join us again today for part two of a very, very important conversation. So without any further ado, let us welcome our brother to the platform. Assalamu alaikum, my brother.
Alaikum salam. How are you, brother?
I'm stretched thin, but holding up, alhamdulillah.
Good to see you.
I've been looking forward to having this follow-up with you, brother. There are three pieces of video I want us to be able to take a look at and have some thoughtful discussion around. But before I introduce the first of those videos, I'd like to get your thoughts on, events that have recently taken place overseas in occupied Palestine, most importantly in Gaza, but also what's been happening on the West Bank and in Jerusalem. But most importantly, what's happened over the past few days in Gaza. What are your thoughts?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you again for inviting me and have this conversation with you. It's really my pleasure. Well, what we're witnessing today is a deliberate plan by the Israeli military and the Israeli war cabinet to basically impose on the Palestinians another Nakba. There was a report that was published recently in a magazine, an Israeli magazine called 972 plus 972, which is the area code of Israel, in which it was very detailed report that says that every casualty in Gaza, every bomb that is used by the Israelis in their genocidal war on Gaza has been planned. They know exactly what it's going to hit. They know exactly what kind of damage it's going to have. They know actually who lives there and who's actually sheltering there. Even they claimed in that article that they know every single Palestinian where they live, including infants and 3-year-olds. So it's nothing is deliberate. When you have a war that's been going on for 8 straight weeks, with only 1 week of relief, then you know that this is not accidental. We're talking about a very deliberate war campaign, a genocidal campaign, to inflict as much pain and suffering, as much killing, as much chaos, as much destruction, carnage, and mayhem on the Palestinian population in Gaza. This is not new. Actually, if you try to go and trace many of the statements issued by senior Israeli officials, from the prime minister to his war cabinet to other ministers, it's pretty clear, including even military leaders, in which their plan is very, very plain, very clear, that their plan is to push the Palestinians to either surrender completely or at least inflict enough pain for them to leave Palestine. But no Palestinian is willing to do that, despite all the carnage, despite all the killing. I mean, today was one of the worst days. People are saying we may today have as much as 700 people killed in one day. It was devastating. Let's also remind ourselves that much of the weapons that are being supplied to the war machine is being supplied by the United States. The Wall Street Journal has recently published, I think it was the day before yesterday, published the type of weapons that is being supplied to the Israeli war machine by the United States. There has been at least 40,000 tons, brother, 40,000. That means 40 million pounds of TNT. That's more than Nagasaki and Hiroshima combined. That's the type of TNT and destruction that's been dropped on Gaza in the past 8 weeks. The type of weapons, some of them are extremely damaging. They explode before coming to the ground into 1,000 pieces. So that's why you see many people being hit by shrapnels. So that's why you have so many people have lost limbs, or they have been hit in the face or in different parts of the body. And not only that, you have almost now 23,000 between dead and missing, but we have also around 40,000 who have been maimed. We've seen families who have been totally decimated. We've seen children coming out of the rubble, asking about their parents and siblings, and then they finding out. I mean, today I saw a heartbreaking image with one child, no more than 6 or 7 years of age, crying because next to him were his brother and his father dead. And he could not contemplate, he cannot imagine, he cannot even understand what's going on. This image is being going on day after day, hour after hour, and nobody around the world is doing much about it. I know that there are thousands and tens of thousands and sometimes even hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, but unfortunately, none of that is making any impact, any effect. We have war criminals running this world, and we have war criminals running this war. And not only you have these criminal acts taking place in front of the whole world. When people were talking about, let's say, the Holocaust back in the 40s, or in different massacres like Bosnia and others, much of it was just behind the scenes. People would hear about it, perhaps would take days or weeks, and no one knows the exact truth about what's happening. People could claim ignorance, could say we didn't really know about it much and we haven't seen, maybe exaggerated. But this is the first time in the history of mankind where you could see exactly and anticipate what's going to happen tomorrow. We know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to be a repeat of what happened today, where you have American supplied airplanes flown by Israelis and perhaps even other nationalities, who knows, because most of these Israelis have dual nationalities, And they are supplied by these huge bombs and missiles, some of them as much as 2,000 pounds. And these are being dropped on an area that is sometimes just a neighborhood, perhaps a neighborhood in Brooklyn or Los Angeles. Just imagine the type of damage that could happen if you drop one bomb. Now imagine that this one bomb is being dropped every few minutes
Yeah.
throughout
Yeah.
northern Gaza, central Gaza, southern Gaza, with no place to hide, no place to go. All
Yeah.
these children, all these women, all these civilians. You have about 2.3 million people. They don't even know where to go. There are no shelters left. Over 60% of Gaza's residents have been totally destroyed or partially damaged. That's about 310,000 residences. That's like the Day of Judgment. This is like, this is like the Armageddon. I mean, that's what people are seeing, and this is not being it's being reported, but nothing is being done to stop it. It is so pathetic when you see 57 Muslim countries coming together almost now 3 weeks ago. And what do they come up with? They say we demand that they open the gates so that we can give them supplies, that we can get the trucks in of the aid, humanitarian aid. And nothing happens unless Israel says so. 57 countries, brother, they spent about $1 trillion on armaments in the past decade. Millions of people under arms, hundreds, perhaps even thousands of planes or tanks, and they can't even get one truck in without Israel saying so. So they go and beg the United States to allow few trucks in, knowing fully well that we're talking about 2.3 million people, over half are children, where they are denied food, denied water, denied medicine, denied medical aid, denied shelter, denied blankets when it's coming cold. And I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, when you put all this together, it's just beyond human comprehension. It's beyond someone's, even if someone was going to write a horror story, I don't think they can write this one. It's more than a horror story. And yet this is still happening. This is still happening before the whole world. And the United States is fully complicit in what's going on.
Speaking of another Nakba, which is, I agree with your terminology, brother, subhanAllah, because this is certainly what it is. There has been, uncharacteristically, although it hasn't done any, up until now, any material good in changing the behavior of apartheid Israel. But there has been a tremendous amount of attention brought to bear on what's happening there and the nature of what's happening there. There's a piece of video I'd like for us to see and for you to share your thoughts on from the investigative reporter, journalist Chris Hedges. Let's see that video, Brother Sadiq. Brother Sadiq may have stepped away. SubhanAllah, he may have stepped away from the council. We'll come back to that. And because I'm in I'm in the hotel, I'm having to use my iPhone for this interview, so I can't send the brother a message, unfortunately. There are 3 videos, inshallah ta'ala, we're gonna show during the course of this less than 1 hour broadcast. Now, one is the journalist Chris Hedges. There's another piece that we're going to show on President Carter, sharing some thoughts from years ago when he was being interviewed by Amy Goodman, and sharing some very thought-provoking thoughts on the power of the Israeli lobby in the United States, and with particular mention on AIPAC, and then also the cancellation of Mehdi Hassan, which has understandably generated a lot of attention. I mean, by MSNBC for his outstanding journalistic ethics and putting some hard questions to folk representing the madness over there, that hard questions needed to be directed at. So if my brother Sadiq is back at the council, brother, we would like to see the video on Chris Hedges, that first video, inshallah.
The incursion and bombardment of Gaza is not about destroying Hamas. It is not about stopping rocket fire into Israel. It is not about achieving peace. The Israeli decision to rain death and destruction on Gaza, to use lethal weapons of the modern battlefield on a largely defenseless civilian population, is the final phase in the decades-long campaign to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. The assault on Gaza is about creating squalid, lawless, and impoverished ghettos in the West Bank and Gaza, where life for Palestinians will be barely sustainable. It is about building a series of ringed Palestinian enclaves where the Israeli military will have the ability to instantly shut off movement, food, medicine, and goods to perpetuate the misery. Privilege and power, especially military power, is a dangerous narcotic. Violence destroys those who bear the brunt of its force, but also those who try to use it to become gods. Israel uses sophisticated attack jets and naval vessels to bomb densely crowded refugee camps, schools, apartment blocks, mosques, and slums, to attack a population that has no air force, no air defense, no navy, no heavy weapons, no artillery units, no mechanized armor, no command and control, no army, and calls it a war. It is not a war. It is murder. Images of dead Palestinian children lined up as if asleep on the floor of the main hospital in Gaza are a metaphor for the future. Israel will from now on speak to the Palestinians in the language of death. Those who orchestrate such sieges do not grasp the terrible rage born of long humiliation, indiscriminate violence, and abuse. A father or a mother whose child dies because of a lack of vaccines or proper medical care does not forget. A boy whose ill grandmother dies while being detained at an Israeli checkpoint does not forget. Families who carry the broken bodies of their children to hospitals do not forget. All who endure humiliation, abuse, and the murder of those they love do not forget. This rage becomes a virus within those who eventually stumble out into the daylight. Is it any wonder that 71% of children interviewed at a school in Gaza recently said they wanted to be a martyr? The refusal by our political leaders, from Barack Obama to all but 5 members of Congress, to the major media, to speak out in defense of the rule of law and fundamental human rights, exposes our cowardice and our hypocrisy. The public debate about the Gaza attack engages in the absurd pretense that it is Israel, not the Palestinians, whose security and dignity is being threatened. This blind defense of Israeli brutality towards the Palestinians is a betrayal of the memory of all those killed in other genocides in other times. The lesson of the Holocaust is not that Jews are special. It is not that Jews are unique. It is not that Jews are eternal victims. The lesson of the Holocaust is that when you have the capacity to halt genocide, and you do not, no matter who carries out that genocide or who it is directed against, you are culpable. And we are very culpable. The F-16 fighter jets, the Apache attack helicopters, the 250-pound smart GBU-39 bombs are all part of the $3 billion military aid we give to Israel. Palestinians are being killed tonight with American-made weapons. But perhaps our callous indifference to human suffering is to be expected. We, after all, kill women and children on an even vaster scale in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Okay, Brother Salih, given the circumstances that we're operating under today, I'm not able to communicate with you through my iPhone because I'm having to use that this device for the broadcast. Let's go ahead and play the other two videos. The first one being the interview of President Jimmy Carter from years ago. And then we're going to follow that with the MSNBC commentary on the cancellation of Mehdi Hassan. So Jimmy Carter first. Let's go ahead and show that.
Why don't Americans know what you have seen?
Americans don't want to know. And many Israelis don't want to know what is going on inside Palestine. It's a terrible human rights persecution that is far transcends what any outsider would imagine. And there are powerful political forces in America that prevents any objective analysis of the problem in the Holy Land. I think it's accurate to say that not a single member of Congress with whom I'm familiar would possibly speak out and call for Israel to withdraw to their legal boundaries or to publicize the plight of the Palestinians, or even to call publicly and repeatedly for good faith peace talks. There hadn't been a day of peace talks now in more than 7 years. So this is a taboo subject, and I would say that if any member of Congress did speak out, as I've just described, they would probably not be back into Congress the next term. Who are these forces that you're talking about? Well, very effective work of the American-Israeli group called AIPAC, which is performing its completely legitimate task of convincing Americans to support the policies of the Israeli government. And AIPAC is not dedicated to peace. They're dedicated to inducing the maximum support in America, in the White House, in the Congress, and in the public media for whatever policies the Israeli government has at a particular time, and they're extremely effective. Do you agree with Walton Mearsheimer, their new book, The Israel Lobby, about the power of AIPAC determining U.S. foreign policy? I have to say I haven't read the book. I've read stories about it. I don't really know about the details of it, but I do know that AIPAC is very powerful and completely legitimate. I'm not complaining because that's their purpose in life, and AIPAC, I think, was organized in the distant past, I think, when Eisenhower was president, and they've grown in influence, and in some ways they are to be admired.
Did they influence you as president?
Not really, because I was immune from those pressures. When I was elected president, you know, I came out of nowhere. Nobody thought I was going to win until the last minute, and so I wasn't obligated to them. And the Israelis completely dominate the life of the Palestinian people.
Mehdi Hasan has been one of the few mainstream hosts in the Western world who has put proper scrutiny on Israel's actions in Gaza. That's included highlighting the genocidal statements from Israeli leaders, as he did here.
When it comes to quote-unquote intent in the context of the Genocide Convention, listen to what Israeli politicians and generals themselves have said. Cabinet ministers like Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, who said Israel was fighting human animals and ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip, no electricity, no food, no fuel. Or Energy Minister Israel Katz, who said no electrical switch will be turned on in Gaza, no water pump will be opened, and no fuel truck will enter until the Israeli abductees are returned home. Or Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu, who said blow up and flatten everything in the north of Gaza and give that land to Israeli settlers. And if you think that's bad, just listen to the man in charge of Israel's government and military speaking on Saturday.
You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible, and we do remember and we are fighting.
That was Prime Minister Netanyahu invoking a biblical story in which the Israelites were told to exterminate, to literally kill all the men, women, and children from an ancient tribe called Amalek. Not a great reference when we're debating accusations of possible genocidal intent, I think we can all agree.
So statements like that won't be new to you guys. We've been highlighting this stuff for weeks now, but not many people in the mainstream media have. You don't see many segments like that in the mainstream media on MSNBC, on the BBC here, on CNN, for example. Mehdi Hasan has also been an exceptionally tough interviewer. So 2 weeks ago, he put questions like this to Netanyahu advisor Mark Regev.
Why did your military spokesman on Monday point to a calendar in Arabic and say these are the names of terrorists on them? That's false. Can you accept that here and now?
I'm not aware of the incident.
Let's put up the image. We have the image. You have no comment.
I can't read Arabic. It doesn't help me. I have no comment. I'm not familiar with the incident.
Does your spokesman read Arabic?
Hang on, I have a question, Maddie. You're a journalist. Have you made a professional mistake ever? Not intentionally, but have you made a professional mistake?
Exactly, and I own up to it.
Have you made a mistake?
So can you own up to the mistake?
So if I've made mistakes, you've made mistakes, but there's a difference between making an honest mistake and between Hamas that deliberately exaggerates numbers to suit its propaganda purposes. There's a huge difference. So
it sounds like hold on. You said propaganda. Can we just deal with your colleague Ophir Gendelman's tweet? It's still up 7 days later. Why has it not come down? It's a Lebanese short film. We can put it on screen. It's not Palestinians faking their own injuries. Can we own up to that mistake and take that down? Is that not propaganda?
Once again, I understand that was also a mistake. And
so why is it still up 7 days later?
I'll speak to Ofer about it if you like. I'll speak to Ofer about it if you like. He's a friend of mine and a colleague. I quite like him. He's a good man. He's actually very effective. Why is he effective?
Well,
he speaks mother tongue level Arabic. I agree. He made a mistake.
Mark Regev is not the kind of guy who usually admits to making mistakes, and Mehdi Hasan got him to admit twice there that Israel had made mistakes when it came to pushing out fake news. Right? I haven't seen many other journalists do that over this period. Obviously, we don't get to interview people like Mark Regev on this show. Those were tough questions. And as I say, forensic interviews like that are all too rare in the mainstream media. Yet, what is Mehdi's reward? Well, he's had his show taken off air. The news was reported in Semaphore magazine, and they write this. Two people familiar with the move, which MSNBC privately announced to Star Thursday morning, told Semaphore that Hasan will become an on-camera analyst and fill-in host. Over the past several years, Hasan became a cult favorite online for his tough interview style and impassioned monologues, but these never translated to rating successes on the weekends or during fill-in appearances on prime time shows. The decision has provoked outrage among progressives. Noura Erakat is a Palestinian human rights lawyer. She said this: MSNBC cancels Mehdi Hasan's show. MSNBC make this make sense. Mehdi Hassan's program felt like an oasis on air and more needed than ever. His program with Mark Regev was a whole class on journalistic method. He should be amplified, not shut down. And Cenk Uygur from the Young Turk said this: MSNBC cancelled Mehdi Hassan's show because of course they did. It's not just because he treats Muslims as real human beings. It's also because he actually challenges his guests. And that is the biggest heresy in mainstream media. Access must be protected.
So there we have it, brother. 3 pieces of thought-provoking video. Investigative journalist Chris Hedges providing some historical background on what's been taking place in occupied Palestine for years, and shedding light on what's happening now, the gross violations of human rights abuses of international law taking place. And we have President Carter from years ago sharing his thoughts on the grip that the Israeli lobby, primarily through the organization AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, has on the United States, has on the political system here, and the consequence of that grip that it has. And then we have one of the most exceptional broadcast journalists, and someone that I'm proud to point to as a Muslim brother who has been removed from his frontline position on MSNBC. Why? Because he did his job so well. What are your thoughts on each one of these pieces of video, bro?
Well, each one of these 3 remarkable individuals have been shedding light on part of the story, which most people are unfamiliar with. Each one of them was unlocking part of the puzzle that everybody sees, that this is not understandable. But once you start hearing these voices, the truth becomes clearer and clearer. In the first video, what Chris Hedges, by the way, this video came after the 2014 war. The 2014 war, there was no land invasion. It was for a much shorter time. And the casualties were about 10% of what we have so far. So you can imagine what happened in 2014, which enraged him. Now we are in our 9th week, about to start our 9th week, and we have over 10 times the casualties with total destruction of Gaza. Now you can imagine how we went from there to here. In other words, things have been getting worse, not better. Nothing has been done about it. And this is in a span of less than 10 years. What Chris Hedges was saying basically was trying to describe that this is a pattern, that this is not a one-off. This is not about Hamas doing what happened on October 7th. This is part of a pattern that has been going on now for 75 years, since 1948, where more than two-thirds actually, 80% of the Palestinians who existed on the 1948 areas were ethnically cleansed. My parents and grandparents were part of this ethnically cleansed Palestinians. And when you look at what happened since, is that this pattern never ceded, never ended. I can remember what happened in 1982. I was at the time doing my PhD, and I could remember very vividly the 77 days that Israeli bombardment was taking place on Lebanese and Palestinians throughout South Lebanon and Beirut. There perhaps been about at least 17,000 people killed in that war. Very similar, but even what we see today is much more brutal than what happened in 1982. Even what happened in 1982 was not with the intensity that we see today. We did not see, this is 77 days with a loss of about 17,000. Today, we are talking about 9 weeks and total destruction of Gaza, with about 22,000 missing and killed, and about 40,000 injuries so far, and it's getting even worse by the day. So what Chris was describing basically was a reality that the Palestinians have been living under now for decades. Brother, there are people in Palestine, in Gaza today, these 2.3 million people, including half being children. That's the life they know. They've never seen a day of peace. See, when they talk about peace, they talk about their peace, not our peace. When they talk about prosperity, they talk about their prosperity, not about our people. Our people are not looked at as human beings, deserve of human dignity and freedom and independence and respect. That's not how they look at us. The Israelis have been ruling this part of the world since 1967. I'm talking about Gaza and the West Bank and Jerusalem, and of course, the whole of Palestine since 1948. And that's what it's been, just a living in hell every single day, but at different pace. Today, of course, we're talking about bombs being rained in on the heads of people every single day. But look at the West Bank. Do you see Hamas there? No. How many people have they been killing just in the past few weeks? Hundreds. Right. How many people they have been imprisoning? Yes, they released about 300 people recently to get some of their captives back. They also arrested over 3,000 people without any charges in the past 8 weeks in the West Bank. 3,000. Who's talking about them? Who's talking about their rights? And when some of them were released recently, they were talking about the abuse they were facing every single day. We've seen kids, they were about 13 or 14 years of age. They're certainly not no more than 15. But these people, they broke their arms, they broke their fingers, they were beaten every single day for the past 2 months. Just imagine kids, who are in their custody, and what do? They just beat them up every single day for nothing but trying to take revenge. This is the mentality of supremacy, of Jewish supremacy, the mentality of arrogance, the mentality of seeing you as less than a human being, that you are fair game, everything is fair game. Look at how they were treating women in prison, and how the other side was treating their women when they were under captives. And we've seen that. I don't have to say about it. They were talking about it themselves. Now, in the second video, we saw the President of the United States, the most powerful man in the world at one time between 1977 and 1981. And there he is, he's talking about the power of the Israeli lobby. Mm-hmm. And he's saying that he's yet to meet one politician in office that is willing to challenge this. That's a huge statement. That's an unbelievable statement to come from the person who was once the most powerful person on earth. And he's saying that it's very difficult to challenge this power, that this power is far beyond what people know. And when he was asked why, and he said, I don't think the people want to know, or even the politicians are willing to talk about it. And I think this is a very, very honest and true statement, that at one point, the American people, American society really has to ask these hard questions. When you have politicians who are supposedly representing the interest of your country, but they subordinate this interest to a foreign entity's interest. And we've seen that when you have Congress not willing to give, stuff that the American people need, whether it's in healthcare, food stamps, student loans, you name it. And in 24 hours, with the new convened Congress, with the new Speaker of the House, immediately approving $14.3 billion to a foreign entity, because their allegiance is to that entity more than even to the United States itself. It is the only issue that you have bipartisan support. Nothing else. Every single issue you're going to find fights, even in Ukraine. The reason the former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, lost his speakership is because he wouldn't agree with his minority people to axe $300 million at the time for Ukraine. Now imagine that overnight you have a new speaker and a whole Congress that voted, I think something like 418 or something to 5 to give Israel $14.3 billion overnight without any debate, just on the say-so of the Israeli government. And what happens to the administration? They actually the ones who are pushing for it. So this is a reality. And I think at one point, the American people are going to demand some answers, because I'm sure when people know the facts, this would be totally unacceptable. Now, you can go back to hundreds and perhaps thousands of stories. I mean, there is a book that I read back in 1995. It came in 1995 by J.J. Goldberg. It's called Jewish Power. It's his book, his title, not mine, in which he talks about the power. And this is back in 95. That's like 30 years ago. And he's talking about the power of the Israeli lobby and how in many instances they get their way. You know, very, very rarely would they have to concede anything, and how that they control basically Congress and the White House. And he talks about this in details in this book. And of course, there's another book that came last year by Eric Alterman. The title of the book, We're Not One. And he also talks about the history of Zionism in the United States. And of course, he mentions all these organizations and how they actually undermine Jewish presence in America, because most people would think that when you have powerful organizations as such, whose loyalty first is to the state of Israel before it's the United States, that will undermine the presence of Jews within the United States, because once this becomes known, then who can you trust? Because these people cannot be trusted. And of course, in the interview, Amy Goodman was mentioned in the book by Walt and Mearsheimer, and it's an eye-opening book. So that tells me, and she said this year, so that interview must have been like 15 years ago, because the book came in 2008. And in the book, they actually lay out the whole argument about much of U.S. policy in the Middle East has been subordinated to Israel, and is because of this lobby. I mean, they make a very strong case that many of the mistakes that the United States have been making in the Middle East and in different parts of the world is because of the work of the lobby, whether it's in Iraq or other places. So it is an eye-opening, but unfortunately, the media, which we come to the third video, never talks about that. I mean, Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! Is an outlier. It's not a mainstream. It's the alternative media, so it doesn't get much audience from the normal people, from Americans who listen simply to the mainstream media. So that takes us to the third video, where you have Mehdi Hassan. Mehdi Hassan was doing basically his job as a journalist, which most journalists are not doing their job. Most journalists have become simply, just repeating what really propaganda wants us to hear. So when he starts challenging some of the lies that have been taking place by the Israeli government and their spokesperson, and he had to push him hard for that person to admit that these were lies. He called them mistakes. They are not mistakes. They are absolute lies. And he didn't. I mean, actually, I thought he was very soft on him, because he could have challenged him on 10, 20, 30 different stories. None of them are true. You don't even have to go beyond the Israeli press. I mean, Haaretz just came with a report yesterday and today, debunking much of the false narratives that we've heard, not just from the President of the United States, because he heard it firsthand from the crime minister of Israel, but also because this is what he's been saying all along, and they never shy away from saying these lies. There were no rapes. There were no babies crushed head. There was no babies put in the microwave. There were no burning bodies. None of that is true. They didn't target people because of their Jewish faith. None of these accusations were true. Simply not. But yet we still hear them in some of these politicians, and they think of the Goebbels mantra: the more you say it, the more it could become believable. So it's very tragic that still we have media that is being controlled by these same powerful forces that are basically controlling Congress and the administration, and they continue to exercise. I see though a sliver of hope. I see that many Americans today are willing to speak out, speak up, to protest, to post things on the social media and to register their opposition to this kind of power over their politician, over their society, over their media. And I'm hopeful that over time, there will be a shift. There was this recent poll in which it says that for Americans under 30, now the majority, not only they don't believe Israel, they support actually Palestinian rights. That never happened before. It usually, that support would have been between 5 and 10%. Today we're talking about over 50% of the American people under 30 who no longer believe their government or no longer support their government's aid to Israel. And they actually are revolting against this kind of power over their country and over their society and over their media.
And that's a good place for us to end our conversation on, brother. We've got about 10 minutes left in the broadcast. And, you just alluded to this unprecedented, and that's what it is, an unprecedented response from the global community on what has been taking place in occupied Palestine. Unprecedented. I mean, the massive rallies involving millions of people, not just here in the United States, but also in other parts of the world. I mean, it's just been, it's been massive, it's been sustained, and it's truly unprecedented. You were a very effective political activist. You weren't just a thinker or just a strategist. You were a very effective political activist when you were here in the United States. How would you advise the Arab and Muslim community and young activists across the board, both Muslim and non-Muslim, who have been filling the streets with their anger and indignation over what they are witnessing taking place in occupied Palestine? How would you advise them to, maximize their effectiveness in bringing about much needed positive change, both the Arab and Muslim community and the activists across the board, especially the young activists?
That's a very good question, Akhi. And I think it deserves a much needed answer. I don't know if 10 minutes would be enough, but I'll try my best. I think there will be two approaches for this. And it's the same thing I was also using when I was back in the United States, particularly between 1997 and 2002, when we were very active on the issue of secret evidence. And we had to go wide and far, deep and far within American society, within the media, within the communities, within Congress, the administration, political parties, and so on and so forth. We need to do top-down approach and bottom-up approach. Right now, the political atmosphere is not conducive to top-down. That doesn't mean, by top-down, I mean that you try to work within the system from the top down. You're trying to approach certain people within the administration or Congress or other places. But there is a caveat here, because most people misunderstood what we were doing. You can do top-down approach. There are a lot of risks involved. So the most important thing is that you know your red lines and you never cross these red lines. And Palestine is a red line. So you have to define what your red lines are. When I was approaching these politicians, they always knew where I stood on Palestine. Somebody like David Bonnier, who was the second-ranking Democrat in Congress, he knew exactly where I stood in Palestine. He respected my positions. We can agree on some, we can disagree on some, but I would never cross the red line. And if someone is totally on the other side, then I would, of course, take a position towards him. I would never befriend him, or I would never be part of a structure where I would be crossing these red lines. So this is very important. And now, after 9/11, it became very, very difficult to employ a top-down approach, because the way the administration and the security sectors in the United States, the FBI and other security places, as well as Congress, they made it a litmus test for you to have access that you must compromise on certain things, and we shouldn't be compromising on this. If they want to have a relationship, that relationship should be based on very well-known positions on us, where we don't cross red lines, including we don't betray our community in trying to act like we are a spokesperson for these so that we can hand them over to the security apparatuses or the security sectors or agencies. And of course, we have been abused by, I'm talking about by we, I mean American Muslims have been abused by the different agencies and the different policies that the administration or different administrations since Bush 43 have been employing all the way till now. And there has to be a frank discussion about rolling back some of these policies. We have hundreds of our people, brothers and sisters, somebody like Sister Afia Siddiqui and others, who have been taken into the prison under false pretenses, who have been sentenced to dozens and dozens of years. We need to deal with these issues before we can actually be part of a structure to work top down. But nevertheless, there are certain people in Congress that we can certainly ally ourselves with. So that's number one. Number two, you need to start a bottom-up approach. A bottom-up meaning that you need to start working within the communities and building coalitions with local. I found that to be more refreshing and more, you're going to have much less resistance at the bottom level. You know, we were part of an organization called Hezbollah Organization for Progress and Equality, HOPE. It was a community organization based on faith organization. There were 19 churches and 1 mosque. We did wonders. We did so much together in trying to enhance the living of our community, the living conditions of our community, whatever the issues were. These were not religious issues. What bonded people were bonded together in their faith, but they always worked for the betterment of the community. All our issues were about economic prosperity for the people, you know, living wages, and as well as secret evidence, human rights, and so on and so forth. So we need to start organizing and allying, and this is the best way to educate the American public at a very local place of how we can work together in order to strengthen our communities and change the policies of our government. You know, we could not have been successful. I can tell you this right now. I've never said this in public. We could never have been successful in the secret evidence, to stop the use of secret evidence, if it wasn't for these local coalitions. It was a meeting that we took 12 pastors from Tampa, Florida to the Justice Department, in which we were joined also by 2 legal scholars. 14 people met with the Justice Department, and we discussed with them as a community concern that secret evidence was wrong and it must be stopped. And it was through that meeting that we were able to stop the use of secret evidence administratively. What was left, that we need to do it legislatively, and that's what when we switched to Congress. But the fact that if we were just a bunch of Muslim organizations and went there, that we would never have been successful. But because we had local groups with us, all of them, you know, particularly African American communities and other progressive communities, they came with us to this meeting and they were able to impress upon them. And also when I invited somebody like Henry Hyde, the late Henry Hyde, who was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee at the time, I invited him to Tampa, and he met with these groups, and his eyes were opened to the danger of secret evidence. And that's why we were able to advance this legislation at the Judiciary Committee and have it marked up and passed 26-2. And who was on the other side? It was the ADL, the American Jewish Congress, the American Jewish Committee, and some Islamophobe who were given testimony before Congress to stop it, and they were not able to stop it. We were able to prevail. So you could see how you can build these coalitions together with local people. And then we need to train, brother. We need to train our youth. Our youth are basically not knowing what to do. We need to focus, and we need to put strategy together, because when you see thousands and thousands of people being killed in Gaza today, and you feel totally helpless, not able to do anything, then you see that weakness is really something's not good. When you feel that weak, unable, inept, you know, incompetent, unable to do anything for these people, you feel powerless, and you feel depressed, and you feel down. So the only way you could do that is we have to empower ourselves. You have to start working with these communities. And I'm very, not only hopeful, I'm very optimistic that America now is beginning to wake up and is beginning to see that something's wrong here. This couldn't be right. And I was very, pleasantly surprised to see how many people have been turning actually to Islam when they saw the resilience of the Palestinian people. They said, oh my God, these people have so much faith. How can I ever get that faith? I've never felt that faithful. Even though I've been to the church dozens of years, I've never felt that. Where do they get that strength? And when they went there and read the Quran and said, oh my God, look at how these people are always content. They really, really believe in God. So this is another way of actually expressing your faith before the people, but you're not you're not being bombed. You're doing this because you love humanity, and you love to do something about the atrocious conditions some people had to live under because of Jewish supremacy, because of Zionist settler colonialist project, because of American imperialism. These are the diseases that we have to work on, and you are in the belly of the beast. That's what you have to do. You need to start organizing, mobilizing, strategizing, and getting people in the streets, and getting people in the different organizations to work together to make a difference.
All right. That's a very good note for us to end on, brother. Zionist supremacy is a cancer, and it's something that, the community, people of faith and people of no faith, people of goodwill, need to weed out and, see it for what it is, and just weed it out. We're going to end on that note. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to have you back again to, further this conversation on this particular issue of what's happening in Gaza. I hope that very soon we can have a post madness conversation on, where we go from here. But I think that today, in this 1 hour discussion that we've had, we've been able to inform folk out there that need to be informed. We've been able to inspire those who are already inspired, but could always use more inspiration to keep going and to take it to another level. The pushback needed to bring about reform. And I just want to thank you, brother, for your voice, and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for brothers and sisters like you who are not afraid to call a spade and do what's necessary in order to bring about change. I am also glad that you touched briefly upon our political prisoners. When I spoke last night briefly, I had a few minutes last night at the event. I did note how grateful I am, for the unique characteristic of our brothers and sisters in occupied Palestine, the Palestinians over there in that occupied land, the emphasis that they put on, their political prisoners, on freeing their political prisoners. And I referenced the fact that we here in the United States need to have that same type of passion, that same type of commitment for redeeming our wrongfully held prisoners here in the United States. But inshallah ta'ala, that's a continuation of a very important conversation for another time.
Inshallah.
So thank you, brother, Dr. Sami Al-Arian. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll close out as we normally do. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihat wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr, which means in the translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except for those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.